Welcome to the Young Turks and drop it. Power panel. Jay Huger, Johnny Pie, Wizard of Woz. We got everybody today. Okay, fine. John Idarola, Wosny Lambre. Woz also, of course, the Prime Minister of Wosnia. And you should check that out on twitch.tv/TYT. I guess John does a show called Damage Report. Okay, so we got a great show ahead for you guys today. But Woz is gonna come back for you guys. We're gonna do the first hour and then he's gonna come back for Juneteenth because Young Turks today leads immediately into Juneteenth. Somebody tell Trump, because he invented Juneteenth, so I'm sure he's gonna wanna watch it.
Maybe he'll be on the special.
So I'll tell you who is on the special. Bridget Todd, Kenya Evelyn, Dr. James Simmons, Dr. Rashad Richey, Jason Carter, Charles Coleman, Wosny Lambre, Wisdom Cole, they're all there tonight. So stay right here, watch throughout, love it. Okay, tons of news for you guys, including progressives in Congress have been upbraided. Do not criticize Joe Manchin. Okay, so much great and horrible news as always. All right,
okay,
Pie.
Let's do it. If you're not afraid of China, you might be soon, because there's a lot of people that are working very hard to terrify you about China, whether it's military threat or economically it's a big contender. There's this sort of Cold War brewing. And why not? For certain, for certain elites, it's a great way to bulk up the defense budget if you're going to be scared about possible war with China. Any sort of economic policy could be justified when it comes to trade with China. But there are thankfully at least some politicians that are pushing back against this narrative. And we want to give credit to Bernie Sanders, who wrote an entire op-ed trying to get people to chill just a little bit when it comes to China. It's available at Foreign Affairs, but here's some of what he had to say. It is distressing and dangerous that a fast-growing consensus is emerging in Washington that views the US-Chinese relationship as a zero-sum economic and military struggle. The prevalence of this view will create a political environment in which the cooperation that the world desperately needs will be increasingly difficult to achieve. And he specifically talks about the need to solve all sorts of different problems, including concerns about human rights, economic issues, climate change. These are all things that we can't simply pretend that China doesn't exist for or make them into our chief rival over. He calls out one of his colleagues by name, saying a few months ago, my conservative colleague, Senator Tom Cotton, compared the threat from China to the one posed by the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Quoting Tom Cotton is saying, once again, America confronts a powerful totalitarian adversary that seeks to dominate Eurasia and remake the world order. And Bernie says, and just as Washington reorganized the US national security architecture after World War II to prepare for conflict with Moscow, Cotton wrote, today, America's long-term economic, industrial, and technological efforts need to be updated to reflect the growing threat posed by communist China. And he puts this, what we're seeing now, develop when it comes to politicians, as he points out, like Tom Cotton, and occasionally politicians like Joe Biden, who have some things to say about China recently. He puts it in historical context, recent historical context, saying the rush to confront China has a very recent precedent, the global war on terror. In the wake of the 9/11 attacks, the American political establishment quickly concluded that anti-terrorism had to become the overriding focus of US foreign policy. Almost 2 decades and $6 trillion later, it's become clear that national unity was exploited to launch a series of endless wars that proved enormously costly in human, economic, and strategic terms, and that gave rise to xenophobia and bigotry in US politics, the brunt of it borne by American Muslim and Arab communities. It is no surprise that today, in a climate of relentless fear-mongering about China, the country is experiencing an increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. And as I mentioned this morning, on the Damage Report, that violence continues. Culver City, actually, just yesterday, had an incident of that sort. So we have a little bit more that we can talk about some other politicians, but Bernie Sanders is hoping to change the conversation about the future of diplomatic ties between the US and China.
Yeah, so first of all, great to see that America is moving their ire from one side of my family to the other. Okay, so I'm Muslim, so we took the brunt of it. And after 9/11, my wife is Chinese, and so obviously our kids are half and half. So now they're moving on to anti-Chinese hate, and again, this is not just Trump now. This is basically the Washington establishment, and that's who Bernie Sanders is calling out, and that definitely includes Democrats. So now he says. And if you follow Bernie Sanders, you might be a little confused. So I want to be clear, and this is really important. And actually, I think maybe even the most important part of this story. Bernie Sanders has not been in favor of just unmitigated free trade with China throughout. And then so simpletons might look at that and go, wait, I thought you were against dealing with China. Now you're saying you're in favor of dealing with China, right? I don't get it. Well, that's because the world's not black and white. The question isn't whether to engage with China. The question is how to engage with China. And the answer isn't we should love them and write them love letters, as Trump did with North Korea, or we should nuke them. No, the world is not black and white. The answer is almost always somewhere in the middle. It doesn't mean that the moderate position or the centrist position is right. It just means the extremes are unlikely to be right. And did Bernie carry that nuance forward to today? Yes, he said that the Chinese government is surely guilty of many policies and practices that I oppose and that all Americans should oppose. The theft of technology, the suppression of workers' rights in the press, the repression taking place in Tibet and Hong Kong, Beijing's threatening behavior toward Taiwan, and the Chinese government's atrocious policies towards the Uyghur people. So again, simpletons on the right or people that think they're on the left or something will go, oh no, I don't get it. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Oh, come on. On the one hand, he says China's bad on some things, and on the other hand, he says we shouldn't nuke them. I don't get it. It's just really not that hard. So yes, we should have a smart strategic policy towards China. We don't need to have them as an adversary. On the other hand, you can't be just let everything slide and go, you're gonna steal our IP. Okay, yeah, no big deal, right? Oh, you're setting up concentration camps for the Uyghur people. Oh, no problem. No, the answer is, here's how we're going to oppose that, and here's how we're gonna work with you on climate change. Because we don't have a choice. They're among the top two powers in the world. We're one, they're the other. We have got to find a way to work with each other while pushing them in the right direction. So as usual, Bernie Sanders, a rare voice of reason in DC.
Yeah. Well, Cenk, I think you're wrong when you say that we don't need to make those guys our enemy. How else are we gonna justify damn near $1 trillion in our budget every single year for the military, right? Like if we don't have a scary enemy, you can't justify that in a country where inequality, is at record highs, right? Like you can't justify the amount of resources we commit to planes that don't even freaking work for enemies who we don't even freaking have, right? Like that's the entire point of it. And I thought about it, when I was reading Bernie's op-ed, I was like, man, we don't even talk about ISIS anymore. Remember when ISIS was gonna come, some guy in a turban in a black pickup was gonna come and strangle your babies in their carriages while you slept? Like, remember that? It's completely over. We don't even talk about it anymore. I think even 2016, it wasn't even a focal point of either one of the candidates' platforms, right? Like we're over as Americans, we're over the war on terror. So we need a new big bad, and I guess that big bad is China.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that because I want to talk a little bit more about the future of where this conversation is going to go. So we had the status quo. Bernie is trying to put out there that hey, maybe we don't need a stupid, pointless, expensive Cold War, and he's not the only one, of course. Other politicians, including Representative Ilhan Omar, have spoken out. Ilhan said recently, we need to distinguish between justified criticisms of the Chinese government's human rights record and a Cold War mentality that uses China as a scapegoat for our own domestic problems and demonizes Chinese Americans. And the thing is, like,
nuance.
Oh God, it's like you accept reality and don't go to war with them. Anyway, but what are we supposed to do? Like, when I think about the last 20 years, we invaded a couple countries and then just stayed there, forever. Now they're gonna use China as a way to continually spend ever more on, as Wosny pointed out, planes that don't work. It doesn't matter how many hundreds of billions of dollars you throw at them, you apparently can't make them stay aloft. And there won't ever be any justification for it. It'll just be, woo, like nothing's happening. I don't think this is gonna be like the last Cold War and there's gonna be proxy wars between us. I don't think economically that's viable, but they are still gonna try to sustain this sort of thing. And at least, as we were talking about with TDR, when it was the Middle East, like there's conflict going on, we're losing soldiers. People can see that and they can potentially get sick of it. And there could be a reaction to it. But this is mostly gonna be military budget and an occasional speech that gets people pissed off at China or whatever. It seems so much easier to sustain without any rationale, just as an excuse to change some trade policies and to pump up the military budget.
Yeah.
So what do we do? How do we get people fired up against this Cold War when nobody really supports it anyway?
Yeah, nobody supports it. The right wing doesn't support it, the left wing doesn't support it. There's only one set of people who support it, and you guys are gonna be shocked. It's politicians who get tons of financing from the defense industry. Whoa, that is, I did not see that coming.
But and the thing is, the thing about China, why this is a foolhardy enemy to pick. Our economies are like this. They're intertwined. You can't separate what we do from what China does because, basically 35, 40 years ago, American business decided we wanted all their cheap labor. And now that they've built up a pretty sizable middle and wealthy class, we want their consumers. We want to sell stuff to them, right? Like they're too important to us to ever actually spite or smite them. So this is just a weird sort of enemy to try to just take up on a whim. It doesn't make sense. We are China at this point.
Yeah, but actually you bring up a really important point because part of the reason why we weren't as much Cold War mongering against China for the last 20, 30 years was because we loved that they were opening up their markets. So McDonald's, et cetera, were rushing in and they were thrilled that China is opening up and basically becoming capitalist. But now that China has built up their own businesses, they are starting to block Western interests and particularly American business interests within China and blocking access to that market of over 1.2 billion consumers. That's a market 4 times larger than America. So now part of what's driving is not just the defense contractors, but other corporations pressuring corporate Republicans and Democrats. Hey, now make them open up, okay? Otherwise, threaten them and stuff, right? Because we need that market, And guys, again, a nuance on all fronts, right? So, is China an actual threat to Hong Kong and Taiwan? Yes. So my wife's originally from Taiwan. I know a lot of folks from there, and they all have to serve in the military, and they train. And I forget the exact number of hours or days now. My recollection is their entire military is training around 8 hours, because that's how much they've calculated America will take to get there and rescue them. Okay, because Taiwan cannot do a war with China. So I forget if it's 8 hours or 2 days or whatever it is, but whatever the number is, that's their entire training is just hold until America comes, okay? And so it's important that we protect our allies. So it's not like, we're not doing Cold War, so who cares about Taiwan? Take it anytime you want, right? No, you've got it. And then, by the way, should we want the markets opened up so that American companies? There's no such thing as American companies. They're all multinational. But some of the companies that started here and are based in Delaware, that they open up as well and are able to compete there. Yes, because some of those folks work here, and that would create more jobs to be able to sell goods into China. So we want all those things, but we don't need to do it by building a thermonuclear submarine that doesn't work, but funnels like $500 billion to Raytheon.
Yeah.
Right. That's the underlying issue that not only do the politicians never talk about, but the media almost never talks about. I mean, there's a multi-trillion-dollar elephant in the room. That's the defense contractors, and that's driving most of this Cold War mongering that Bernie Sanders is fighting against.
Yeah, and my final thought is, I feel to some extent, I think the media is The fact that they wouldn't have that conversation is partly complete and utter ignorance on virtually every other country other than the United States, including the United States actually. But then partially, I think, at a much lower level, a little bit of fear of seeming not patriotic enough. That if you were not to, like, it feels a little bit like that thing over the past 2 decades of, no, you have to rally with your country. This is our national enemy. How dare you talk about them as someone that we should work with, that we should try to get along with, that we should try to then influence to get better on human rights. I feel like there's a little bit of that too. And the way that things are going, the way that politicians in both parties, the way their narrative is when it comes to China, I worry that that pressure on media is gonna get stronger. So all the more important that there are both media as well as politicians that are willing to speak out for a different path. That said, oh no, sorry, Wosny, what were you gonna say?
No, what I was gonna say is I think some of the propaganda has seeped into American thought amongst the citizenry. I saw it myself in my own job where, Daryl Morey, general manager then of the Houston Rockets, he put out a free Hong Kong tweet, and it caused basically a brouhaha, international incident, because the NBA does a lot of business in China, and the Chinese government don't play. Yeah. If you want to make money over here, you don't get to talk crap about our government. And a lot of people over here felt like, yo, those dudes don't get to tell us how to talk. We have freedom of speech, democracy, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot of negative feelings towards China within the population. Not that people want to see us go to war or something like that, but people definitely see China in an extremely unfavorable light these days.
Yeah, well, we certainly saw over the last year a lot of attempt to tie that in with the pandemic, of course, too.
Yep.
In any event, we do have to take our first break. When we come back, we're gonna be talking about the fact that for something like 4 months now, no Republican has cared at all about January 6th. It's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Well, they found a way to worry about it. We'll break down that way after this.
In our member section, Funkin' for Fun writes in, if no wars, what do we do with the generations of Americans bred to hate foreign people? Fair question, right? It's funny because in Washington, as Bernie points out, it's basically like, it's not whether we should hate people, just a question of which people should we hate?
Spin the wheel.
Right? The Russians, they're terrible. Now some of us think they're wonderful. We gotta move. Okay, the Muslims, they're terrible. Okay, now let's move. China, okay, right, Chinese.
Greenland, watch out.
We go.
Watch out, Greenland. We'll get to you.
Hey, look, we were looking to snap them up.
It's true.
When you tell the donors, they're like, green. A land full of green. Okay. All right, so you guys know we're doing a town hall with Senator Nina Turner on June 26th. And now you can reserve your spot at tyt.com/events. So go check that out. Killer Mike and I are going to host it, which is super badass. I love that he's coming in to do this.
That is awesome.
And it's going to be about economic justice. I love that topic. So make sure if you're anywhere near Cleveland, tyt.com/events, okay? And then of course you guys could watch the town hall wherever you are too. Okay, speaking of Killer Mike, he's gonna go on Rashad's show. So Indisputable, June 22nd, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. So that's next Tuesday, and it follows Damage Report, of course. Damage Report, then Indisputable, and Killer Mike's gonna be on there as well. Tonight, we got Juneteenth coming up right after this show. Now, let me go to, look at all these wonderful new YouTube members. Sebastian Domer, Michael Singleton, Sephiroth Jutson, which is a great name. Sudipta Mazumdar, also a great name. So thank you guys. You guys make the Young Turks possible. Without you guys, we got nothing. With you guys, I think we can get everything. I'm super hopeful. I'm almost kind of beginning to get done with the book. And that the end is where we go, ta-da, we win. We win. Okay, justiceiscomingbook.com. I'm gonna show you how we win. All right, Forbesilla says, Woz, I professed my love for you the other day via Super Chat, and you told me to message you on your social.
I remember that.
So I did, and I still have not heard back. Please respond. You're breaking my heart. And then there's a sad face emoji, Woz, just so you know.
There's a lot going on in my Instagram messages, and that's all I'll say for that. It's easy to lose stuff in the shuffle.
Yeah.
So that wasn't intentional.
Yeah, and guys, I assume they're partly kidding or maybe wholly kidding. But the guy's the prime minister of Wosny. He's got a lot of things to do, okay? So one thing at a time. Okay, we're running out of time. Crump the THC Dragon game 1,000 bits because he or she is awesome. All right, much love. We'll be back in a minute. The Young Turks, Cenk, John, and Woz with you guys. John is in the news business, so he's got more of it.
I do actually. I'm running low, but I think I've got something. Yes. Okay, let's talk about this. It took less than, I don't know, 48 hours from Tucker Carlson saying, hey, maybe the FBI did an insurrection, to now it's just every Republican. Every Republican seems to agree with it. And they started at the bottom, so here's Louis Gohmert.
So if there were federal agents that were involved on January 6th, we really need to know what the FBI knew and when they knew it. And not only that, we need to know how much participation did any of our federal friends, either at DOJ, FBI, or any of the intel community, what kind of role were they playing?
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions. So first of all, I need to know what Louis Gohmert knew, if anything, and when he knew it before he forgot it, because he doesn't appear to know anything. Also, dude, you got questions, you know what to answer them? Maybe some sort of commission. Like, they love to talk about like, no commission, and here's my list of questions. I have so many. And by the way, like, so they throw out, the FBI did it, or I don't know, the CIA did it, or maybe it was the NRO or the NSA, I don't know, it was something. Any of this is possible, by the way. There are many things that can occur in this world, but I know this, they don't have any more reason to believe that it was one of those groups than I do that it was the Forest Service. We watched Tucker Carlson come up with it on air. He started one section of a monologue saying maybe the FBI was involved, and like a minute and a half later, he said they were involved. And then the next day he said, it's on you to prove that they weren't. That's not how anything involved in truth telling or truth discovering actually works. So is it possible? Sure, as we'll get into, it's not like the FBI and other groups haven't got involved in things like this before to make groups look bad historically. But there is no evidence yet that that's true, except like we're throwing these concerns out. Louis Gohmert's already on the House floor, and we got more coming. It's just a thing now. There's no pumping the brakes on this, it feels like.
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you guys why they've switched to the FBI in a second. But first of all, I disagree with John. I think you could just make up who's responsible, then they have to prove that they didn't do it. So the person I'm making up is Tucker Carlson. I think he mainly orchestrated the Capitol riots along with Antifa, tourists, and the FBI. And then he spearheaded all of them. He's like, tourists, you go left. Antifa, you go right. FBI, right up the middle. Okay, and Tucker was the mastermind behind it. I dare him. He said, look, he's got to prove it wasn't him. He's got to prove it.
Just prove it. Why not? Why not prove it?
But why won't you prove it, Tucker? Why won't you prove it? It's getting weird out here, okay? I love that, and it actually is, as somebody pointed out in social media, yes, sometimes actually positive things happen in social media, though it's rare. They're like, when I pointed out, wait, you guys got to make up your mind. Is it Antifa? Is it tourists? Or is it the FBI, right? And one of the commenters said, no, actually it's part and parcel of propaganda to get you to believe two completely different things about the same phenomenon. Because once it's part of the trick is to get you to divorce yourself from logic, reason, and reality. And then they replace it with propaganda. So then you'll believe anything, that it was a tourist dressed as Antifa, disguised as FBI. And they go, yeah, obviously, right? Now, but this is gonna take a dark turn in a second, but I agree with John. Louis Gohmert's like, what did the FBI know and when did they know it? If only there was a commission to study what happened on that day. Louis, this is a little embarrassing. You voted against that commission. But remember, Louis is mental. Look, I don't know if he's like a deranged liar or just deranged, but I'm going with just deranged. He's the guy who gave the speech about how Barack Obama was reconstituting the Ottoman Empire. Okay, now at the end of Obama,
that would have made you very happy. You would have voted Obama for a third term, Jake, wouldn't you?
We're back, baby. No, I would not have wanted that. Anyway, but at the end of Obama's second term, the Ottoman Empire remained entirely unreconstituted. Okay, they were not put back together, etc. But no amount of right-wing conspiracy theories being debunked ever convinces them that the next one isn't going to be true. Like Donald Trump is retaking office, Obama setting up FEMA camps, etc. It doesn't matter. They're not, and this is what's really trippy, and it's really hard for all of us to wrap our mind around it. They just don't care what's true. They don't care at all what's true. And it's amazing. Now the dark turn. Why are they replacing the tourist theory and the Antifa theory with the FBI theory? Because they've given up on democracy and they are now agitating towards getting everybody to fight the tyranny of government. And so Matt Gaetz talking about Second Amendment rights need to be used against the tyranny of government. Then Representative Cawthorn yesterday we covered on the show talking about its Second Amendment is not for hunting, it's to use against the tyranny of the government. 28% of Republicans say it might be time for violence. And now here comes Tucker Carlson saying, now if you're really upset at anyone, it should be the FBI. And they do seem a little tyrannical. So this is headed down a very dark path.
And it's like you took the words out of my mouth, Cenk, because I'm confused by the idea of right wingers discrediting the police, the FBI, the cops. Like the idea that, we live in a world where right wingers find the FBI to not be credible, and they're part of some fake insurrection to make right wingers look bad. I never thought I would see this world. Now, are they gonna follow that logic to, them inventing fake terrorists out of whole cloth, like the FBI doing that practice where they like give people bombs and guns and be like, hey, you wanna blow stuff up? Then lock them up and say that they're locking terrorists up? Or are we gonna erode their credibility when it comes to basically prosecuting and fighting a sham drug war in which literally millions of black people and brown people have been incarcerated for decades behind? I mean, if we're in the process of discrediting the FBI, let's freaking do it. But the idea that, again, the right wing is no longer pro FBI, i.e. no longer pro cop, is just staggering to me.
I sort of doubt it. I feel like it's gonna end up like Tucker Carlson every 4.5 weeks says something about how he doesn't like the ruling elites, and then he pushes for every economic interest the ruling elites have. It's fake, it's not substantive, it's convenient and timely. But it's increasing in number. If Louis Gohmert is the bottom rung of the Republican Party, about half a rung up, you have people like Matt Gaetz, who during an appearance on Newsmax show Cortez and Pellegrino, which I'm just learning exists, Matt Gaetz said he believed that the FBI might have had a role in organizing and participating in the attack on the 6th.
Here we go.
And had written a letter to FBI Director Christopher Wray to demand answers. He says the FBI clearly doesn't have objections to selected releases of video and images from these days, but it begs the question, why is there not more transparency? What did the FBI know and when did they know it? Which is just every stupid person just puts that at the end of their questions to sound smart and historic or whatever. And Matt Gaetz is the one who goes on, I believe he did this on Twitter, where he is like, well, the FBI, they infiltrated groups like, for instance, in the civil rights movement, which is totally true. He doesn't give a damn about it, but it's true. And it's like, is there anything worse than weaponizing accurate historical information to push something that, while theoretically possible, like the FBI being involved in that, he has no reason to actually believe? Why does Matt Gaetz have questions? Because he watched Tucker Carlson. I guarantee there is literally nothing beyond that. But it's enough that you now have another congressperson that's pushing for this. And we have a third. Marjorie Greene says we need names and answers about the FBI operatives who were involved in organizing and carrying out. She's not saying we need to know if they were. She's saying we need to know which ones did because they did. And she says that there was a backup plan to stop Trump in Russia collusion witch hunt, which is grammatically fun. Now we are finding out they were deeply involved in January 6th. So it's been, I don't even think it's been 3 days. Tucker Carlson said, is it possible they were involved? Now she's saying they were deeply involved. So by Sunday, what will be left of any of this?
Yeah, so John, first of all, they're the deep state. If they're gonna get involved, it's gonna be deeply.
That's true.
Second of all, you mispronounced Marjorie Taylor Greene. And thirdly, now going to why they're going to this, back to why they're going to this in the first place. Look, so the FBI has two elements to it that are going to relate to the story. One is, do they have a history of spying in on protesters? Absolutely. We've all said it during the civil rights era. They were horrible. And when they were led by J. Edgar Hoover, they weren't trying to ferret out crime. They were just trying to basically suppress and oppress anyone that wasn't white right-wingers. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. And if you don't know that, you don't know anything about American history. And they had Fred Hampton murdered, and we can go on and on, right? Nowadays, the FBI is more of a machine. That doesn't mean that, oh great, they don't do anything wrong. No, after 9/11, they investigated Muslims that were perfectly innocent, et cetera, et cetera. But lately, the FBI has actually caught a bunch of white supremacist terrorists. And I've given them credit on the show a number of times for that. Hey, look, they stopped a bombing. They had the truck full of bombs. They were going to go there and they were going to blow up a building in the middle of the country. And the FBI stopped that, so thank you. We don't want buildings blown up, right? And they've stopped Muslim terrorists too, but lately, unfortunately, there's been way more white supremacist terrorists. Now, all of a sudden, FBI becomes the enemy. When they're spying in on black people, they're awesome and wonderful, and Blue Lives Matter and cops and law enforcement and law and order. They stop white supremacist literal terrorists, right? I'm not even talking about January 6th. I'm talking about all the other white supremacists. They say, oh, they were about to bomb a synagogue. They were about to bomb a building they thought had immigrants in it, et cetera, right? I don't know about this FBI. It looks a little like deep state to me, right? Now, the second part of it is, I hope to God that the FBI had informants inside Oath Keepers and Proud Boys. If you're not infiltrating those groups that are constantly saying online, we want to do violence, right? Not everybody in those groups says it, but a lot of them say it, and their leaders say it, and they revel in it. In order to get into Proud Boys, you have to go through a violent initiation, et cetera, but that's the least of it. And so now there's 36 people who were arrested, involved in January 6th, involved in those groups, et cetera. So if the FBI is doing their job, they are not infiltrating random right-wing groups. I would hate that. No matter how much I disagree with the groups, I would not want the FBI infiltrating anything like that, right? But if there is specific actionable intelligence that they can prove to a court to get a warrant or whatever else they need, that somebody's going to commit violence, that is exactly what the FBI is supposed to investigate. And so that's why in a conspiracy theory, you only need one or two things to seem like they're going in your direction. So Tucker's actually being kind of smart about this. He says it's the FBI. later we'll find out that the FBI, of course, had informants inside. Oath Keepers is potentially one of the most violent groups in America, right? And so once you find out that the FBI had an informant inside Oath Keepers, what's Tucker gonna come out and say? Aha! I told you.
When that was not what he claimed.
That is not what he claimed, right? But he's gonna say, and every knucklehead right winger is gonna be like, aha, FBI has informants. Yeah, FBI has informants, we all know that. And they should have informants in violent groups, right? But that doesn't mean they planned the Capitol riot. That doesn't make any sense. But every conspiracy theorist will not only, this is write it down in stone. You will see this all over social media. The minute there's any story about an FBI informant, every right winger on social media will be like, you guys thought we were crazy. The FBI has informants inside these groups, so they obviously planned it along with the tourists. Okay.
Well, look, the only other thing I want to say about this, because I want to play this last video, is, and I think maybe this is obvious. I don't know, sometimes I think I need to see. Alex Jones said that he was part of spreading, he told Trump that it was the FBI or something, right? So there's a link to Alex Jones, but I think the link is actually more significant than that. All this is a savvy version of, it was a false flag. That's all it is. So in the same way that you might have heard that QAnon is going away because they don't use the term QAnon very much anymore. They don't necessarily talk about the Great Storm. They've taken away some of the rhetoric that were considered sort of the symbols of QAnon, but those communities are still around, those people are still around, the conspiracy theory continues. They figured out that saying false flag makes you look like a crazy person. But if you just say the FBI did that insurrection, well, you're being more specific and you're on TV after all. Maybe there's something to it. All this is they took Alex Jones, who is way too crazy. People aren't gonna pay attention to him. They're not gonna give him any credibility. But Tucker Carlson's on TV and he avoided some of the buzzwords. And now we have multiple Congress people all saying it was a false flag until you prove that it wasn't, about an attack that left multiple people dead. So that's how the right wing is evolving. They've taken the craziest fringe radicals, they've washed it 5%, and now it's on TV, and millions more Americans will believe that sort of stuff is true.
Last thing I'm gonna say about this, this all began with Tucker Carlson saying some of the people the government has not charged yet are unindicted co-conspirators, hence they must be FBI. That's totally false, but I just wanted to point out one more time. Donald Trump was an unindicted co-conspirator of Michael Cohen in the Stormy Daniels case. So Trump is the FBI and hence the deep state.
That's how deep it is.
Oh my God, the call's coming from inside the house.
Anyway, Jesus. Okay.
And most importantly, guys, what's most important about these conspiracies and everything else, they're distractions. You don't gotta talk about how you feel, Marjorie Taylor Greene, about the infrastructure bill. You don't gotta talk about how you feel about the state of American work, getting Americans back to work and decent paying jobs.
Yeah.
Why would you ever talk about that when you can peddle nonsense about the FBI plotting against you and your QAnon homies?
That is true. That is very true. Now it's the FBI and a little bit of critical race theory, which we're gonna talk about in a minute. It was Mr. Potato Head, Dr. Seuss before. Like, at least it's changing. They're keeping things fresh. That said, we're gonna take our second break, and when we come back, we got a lot more for you.
right, back on the social break. No Need Consequence writes in, anyone who could make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. So that's an old quote and an apt one, unfortunately, in this case. And then I like this one, of course, you'll see why. In our members section, tyt.com/join to become a member, Jam writes in, you know what? Seeing the amount of research and work he's putting into this, I think I'm actually gonna read this jank book. I appreciate that. You could do a pre-purchase, and I promise it will actually come out. justicescomingbook.com.
Do you have an estimate for when you're gonna finish?
Okay, let's move on. Okay, that's a fair way to hold me accountable. So no, I was supposed to finish by 4th of July. Okay,
you got time.
We'll see what happens. All right, Pamela Twinning is a new member. She hit the join button below. By the way, for the members at the higher levels, I think 25 and above, at some point we're gonna do an AMA, so you'll enjoy that. Nice. Now, let me go to Azat Baki writing in, Glenn Greenwald and other fake leftists have spent all day on Twitter defending January 6th trutherism and lauding truther-in-chief Tucker, who supported the Iraq war and called Iraqis primitive monkeys, as a principled opponent of the national security state. Okay, look, I don't know what happened to Glenn. Glenn was a real journalist and broke some of the most important stories of my lifetime. And so he's not like the rest of the clowns. And the rest of them were professional clowns through and through, right? But Glenn, I don't know what happened to him. And it's possible that the corporate Democrats and the corporate media lying about him a billion times over just made him snap. But his defense of the right wing is inexplicable. He's supposed to hold everyone accountable. That's what we're all supposed to do, and it seems like he lost a string on that one. But I'm sure if he sees this, he'll, oh my God, I hate Cenk and blah blah blah, and everything is personal now, etc. I don't know how to be clearer than I think he did great work, amazing work, and I hope he returns to that one day. And still half of what he says is true. When he does criticize corporate Democrats with the rotating villain, etc., that is correct. It's just the other half has lost the string. It's not about being partisan. And Glenn knows this show has never been like that. He agreed with us a billion times as we went after both corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans. So I hope he finds his way again. All right, we'll be back in a minute. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, John, and Woz with you guys. I'm just gonna read 2 things from Twitch. We love our Twitch audience. First of all, Jeff Waldorf gifted a sub and resub for the 10th month.
Nice.
People check out Waldorf Nation. So he originally came up as a viewer of TYT and now has his own show. We love that. Nimbus Space Wagon Dragon wrote in, Friday Power Panel, booyah, drop it. Thanks for all you do, TYT. Sometimes the truth is so depressing, but you give it to us in a way that at least empowers us to try for change. I love that, you got it exactly right. No matter what happens, we're gonna keep fighting for change, and I'm the most hopeful man in America. We're gonna get change one day, okay? All right, John.
Let's do this. The recent tide of bills in state after state that seeks to cancel any teacher who teaches about racism, who says things about America's history that are true and unfortunately politically incorrect for that, that's not going away anytime soon. Why do I know that? Because Donald Trump has now become personally invested in the critical race theory debate. He decided that Juneteenth would be a great day to publish an op-ed calling for effectively the banning of any discussion about racism in public schools. And note, he was in favor of Juneteenth becoming a national holiday when he was president. but now it's a great day to say things like this. For decades, the America-blaming left has been relentlessly pushing a vision of America that casts our history, culture, traditions, and founding documents in the most negative possible light. Yet in recent years, this deeply unnatural effort has progressed from telling children that their history is evil to telling Americans that they are evil. We have more. Let's just pause for 1 second to note that Donald Trump didn't come within a mile of writing one single word of this, but it does have his name attached to it. He definitely didn't write it.
I thought
it's coherent.
Yeah,
it's abhorrent, but coherent. Anyway, he goes on. In classrooms across the nation, students are being subjected to a new curriculum. Yeah, he uses the word curriculum. Definitely. Dude's always ready to like whip out a curriculum. Anyway, designed to brainwash them with the ridiculous left-wing dogma known as critical race theory. Instead of helping young people discover that America is the greatest, most tolerant, and most generous nation in history, screw you, Scandinavia. It teaches them that America is systematically evil and that the hearts of our people are full of hatred and malice. Indoctrinating generations of children with these extreme ideas is not just immoral, it is a program for national suicide. Yet that is exactly what the Biden administration endorsed recently in a rule published in the Federal Register, aimed at inflicting a critical race theory inspired curriculum on American school children. This is what the Biden administration wants to teach America's children. That is not in any way true, but it is now fact. That is dogma for millions of Americans, conservative Americans, who see, oh, Trump is now involved in this conversation. And if you're a Republican politician, if you're running for some state office, you're in the legislature, how fast do you want to try to ban critical race theory so that Donald Trump will notice you?
Yeah, so I think that Republicans, of course, have dropped the dog whistle. Now it's a human whistle; we can all hear it, and so
they call that a whistle.
Yeah, I think so. That's the other word for it. I looked it up. This is just like, can you believe they're teaching about slavery and racism in America? We should go back to covering it up. And from the same exact people who told you we can't take down the Confederate monuments because it would be erasing history. So you're allowed to erase history if you talk about slavery being, evil, right? But you're not allowed to erase history if you're putting up a beautiful statue of a Confederate general and celebrating him in the middle of your town, okay? So you guys see the hypocrisy there. But what I found to be interesting in this is that they think that if you teach history, both the upsides and the downsides of any place, that means that you're calling everybody in that country evil, right? And that makes no sense at all. I know they're right wingers, the logic not required, right? But I want to ask, what is the alternative, right? Because look, honestly, every country does propaganda, and I get it. Right, like so, I grew up in Turkey until I was 8 years old, and I came here. And then I remember when we were doing Turkish American Day parades and stuff, we used to have this hilarious chant that I've told you guys about a couple of times. Turkey is the biggest. There's no other country that's even big. And I remember thinking, even as like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, like, I'm pretty sure America's pretty big. And I'm pretty sure we moved to America because it was pretty good, okay? So now, so I love America, and I say that unabashedly. Now, does that mean that's it? Everything America did is gold. Everything we did in the past, it's over. Congratulations, America, you're perfect. And you've always been perfect. I mean, come on, how absurd is that? Part of the reason I love America is we try to fix ourselves. In fact, it's in our founding document. In the Constitution, it says, you should amend this thing. You should do political revolutions. You don't pick up a musket like we did, okay? Or an AR-15, okay? Pick up, a convention, a constitutional convention, or it's actually not exactly constitutional, convention to amend the Constitution, etc. Whatever process you have, a democratic process that we built into the Constitution, we gave you several different ways to amend it. That's how you do it to get to a more perfect union. And these guys are saying, no, let's not do that. Leave it alone, don't touch anything, don't fix it. Whatever you do, don't fix it. And by the way, go back and pretend that everything was hunky-dory for all of it. if you can't see that that's absurd, you're trying super hard not to see it.
And for me, it's a little bit different for me as the child of two immigrants. Oftentimes, and I know my child of immigrant people out there gonna hear me. Oftentimes, my mom would be like, Haitian people are the best. They're so pure of heart. Oh my God, if you go to a Haitian's house as a guest, they're gonna give you their bed. They're gonna make you breakfast. Haitian people are just so amazing. Then out the other side of her mouth, she's like, I can't stand Haitians. They so jealous. They always talking stuff behind your back. They the worst. I can't do it with Haitians. Why
100%.
can't we do this with America? And understanding that, yes, we have some great things and we have some BS as well. Why can't we do that? I don't understand. I think there's just something intrinsic to like feeling like a white person that you just gotta hold on to it. We're just perfect. We're just the best. And we've never done anything wrong ever. It's so ridiculous to me.
No, I know why. First of all, let's note for the record that was hilarious. And 100% true. Same thing with Turkish immigrants, right? Oh, Turkey is the best. We are reconstituting the Ottoman Empire, just like Louis Gohmert said. Okay, we are going to win. We are the best, right? And then you say, hey, maybe we should ask fellow Turks in America for help. Oh, do not ask them. They are bums and losers. They will never help you. They will never help you, okay? Turks never help each other. They learn nothing, okay? But it's not because of that. The question is whether you're in power or not. And so when you're in power, you want to hold on to power. So in the Turkish government does the same thing as, and it's right wing, and it does the same thing as the right wing government in America, right? When I was gonna say when right wingers are in charge. Which is kind of perpetual here, but anyway, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, they say, oh, Turkey's the biggest, there's no other big, blah, 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 right? And so they don't do nuance either. So, but that's because they're in power. Whereas when you're an immigrant, you step out of power and you're a minority in a new country, then you could be more nuanced and go, oh, we have upsides, we have downsides, both of your home country and of your of your previous country. And by the way, today Josh Mandel, running for Senate as a Republican, said that Ilhan Omar shouldn't be supported. She should be deported. Ilhan Omar is, of course, a United States citizen. Of course, you cannot deport United States citizens because you would deport them back to the United States. And not only that, she's a United States congressperson. But to them, they think black, Muslim, not American. And it's deeply ironic because if you don't believe in equality and justice, which is in parts of our founding documents, and certainly that was the stated goal of our founding documents, well, then you don't believe in America.
Yeah.
And so Josh Mandel and Donald Trump in their actions are deeply un-American.
Yeah, Josh Mandel almost couldn't be more explicit that he values skin color over the Constitution. He'll say that he loves the Constitution. Apparently it doesn't count because she's a citizen, you can't deport her, except that she's black. So I guess you can. So which of those does he value? It's pretty clear.
Yeah, why are we even having a conversation about deporting her? Why don't we deport Josh Mandel? I mean, it's just they're both 100% American citizens, right? But if you said that, the right wing, I mean, where are you going to deport him? You can't deport him. He's an American because he's white. Yeah, that's what I thought.
So let's turn now to what's coming. So if you've been following the national conversation over critical race theory, sorry, I'm not to that just yet. I'm doing a little reset there. If you've been following the national conversation over critical race theory, well, what are the next steps? We've seen more than 22 different state bills attempting to ban either critical race theory specifically or literally the discussion of the concept of racism. So we now have Juneteenth as a national holiday. You could not actually explain what it is or why it needed to happen because that would get into slavery, and that's now banned in states like Texas. Well, Donald Trump has a prescription for what conservatives with the MAGA world should do in states around the country. So expect that every Republican is going to follow this template now. He says first, every state legislature should pass a ban on taxpayer dollars going to any school district or workplace that teaches critical race theory, which inherently violates existing anti-discrimination laws. That's all nonsense, but they're gonna interpret it vaguely and they're gonna try to weed out the funding for these schools. Second, each state should create its own 1776 commission and man, this is gonna be something, to examine the public school curriculum and ensure that students are receiving a patriotic pro-American education. Third, parents have a right to know exactly what is being taught to their children. That one's brief. Fourth, parents need to organize locally in every school district in America to eliminate action civics and other versions of the effort to contort traditional civics education. Seriously, he did not write this. Fifth, any parent who objects to the material being taught to their child in public school should get an automatic voucher empowering them to pick another school of their choice. Six, states need to take back control of their schools of education and credentialing bodies to ensure that they are not churning out radicalized teachers. So not only should the teachers not teach racism to kids, the schools shouldn't teach it to the future teachers either. And along the way, we weed out any conversation about racism to stop propaganda for our children and instead replace it with a patriotic, pro-America education, which I'm sure is just gonna be stuffed with historical truth.
Well, that was gonna be my question. Is a patriotic pro-American education actually an education? And I'm asking it in a literal way. I don't mean that you shouldn't be pro-America, that's your opinion. But is history being taught as pro-American actually history? Or is it propaganda? So it's not to say, hey, we should teach kids an anti-American education. That would also be, in a sense, propaganda. How about we teach them actual history instead of making it pro one country or anti one country, even if it's our country. You see, I mean, it's like saying, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to teach pro-America math, okay? What does pro-America math look like? And so it is just as fair to ask, what does pro-America history look like? Does it look like actual history or a history that you've mangled and corrupted and changed to make it appear to match your agenda?
Yeah, my problem with this is that it applies absolutely zero critical thought to anything. There are no countries or people who we can study who are just pure and benevolent and awesome and just greatness from their inception to the present point. Like that doesn't exist in history. Every civilization, every country, every culture has its dark and bleak moments. That's just the nature of man. I don't know why this is so hard for everybody to understand. And I don't know why they're so insecure about young, let's face it, white Americans learning that the United States perpetuated atrocities in the past and that we should learn from them and that we should do much better going forward. Like, why is this so threatening to these people?
Yeah, because it goes to their core identity. They've been taught that they're the best thing since sliced bread, and so if you teach them, hey, maybe America also had issues, right? And look, we're looking to fix those issues, etc. That would hurt their fifis, so they would catch some feelings out of that. And it's more of an emotional thing. I mean, look at how silly this is. When Trump, in this same op-ed, talked about a pro-American education, he said it should be about history, English, and social studies, right? They needed to be pro-American. So I was kidding about the math, but literally, how do you make English pro-American? First of all, it's English, and by definition, not American. Okay, wait till he gets a load of that. He's like, where did this England thing come from? Okay, we gotta get rid of that. Okay, we can't have that anymore. Oh, they're white, okay, it's all right, it's all right. Maybe he wants to root out words like kismet, that's in English, right?
Haboob, gone.
Haboob, but they literally did that.
They did.
Haboob is a sandstorm. And there was a haboob in Arizona a year or two ago, and the right wing were furious at the meteorologist, the weatherman on TV, for calling it its actual English word, haboob. And they're like, sounds Arab, I don't know.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Young Turks. This is a little awkward. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but we are back now. And sadly, the reason there's a technical difficulty is because the power is out in the studio. So we will not be joined by Cenk, but that right there is Mr. David Dayen from the American Prospect, the executive editor of the American Prospect. David, how are you?
I'm good, Francesca. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad I chose not to go into the studio because we would be in darkness now, and that would be sad.
Well, we could leave. I mean, technically speaking, we wouldn't be chained there for an hour.
That's not how blackouts work. You're supposed to stay with the crew you were with when the blackout happened.
with a candle. I
don't know. But thank you all so much for being here. Remember to hit that like button, and we are gonna do this show, just David and I. But that's cool because I've got a lot of questions. He's got answers, I hope, and I hope y'all stick around for it. We're talking about Mitch McConnell putting a little bit of a wrench in Joe Manchin's plans at bipartisanship when it comes to the For the People Act. We're talking about nepotism in the White House, which sadly still exists, even though Donald Trump is gone. We are talking also a little bit about a TikToker who sort of made a bed and then just laid in it of liberal talking points that she had no idea she was doing. So really excited to dig into all of that with you. And thanks so much for dealing with the technical difficulties. Once again, there's some blackouts here in Los Angeles. We might lose power right now, but that's okay because we've got, that's right, people power. Let's get into our first story. Once again, I'm Francesca Fiorentine. David Dayen's right there. Let's do this. Are you ready, David?
I am ready.
Hell yeah, okay. Well, Senate Democrats are going to be bringing the For the People Act to the Senate floor next week. And now what version of the bill we're gonna see, what version Senator Chuck Schumer is gonna bring has yet to be determined. Of course, Princess Joe Manchin of West Virginia laid out his long list of demands, which he swears will have bipartisan support. They did include things like expanding early voting and disclosing of dark money. But he also floated a national voter ID registration in order to vote. And surprisingly, as was discussed on the show earlier in the week, Stacey Abrams came out in support of some kind of compromise when it comes to the For the People Act, and said she might support it. But guess who is not willing to support this revised For the People Act? That's right, Mitch McConnell, the other side of the aisle. In a statement, Mitch McConnell said, in reality, the plan endorsed by Stacey Abrams is no compromise. It still subverts the First Amendment to supercharge cancel culture and the left's name and shame campaign model. It takes away redistricting from legislatures and hands it over to computers. And it still retains the For the People Act's rotten core, an assault on the fundamental ideas that states, not the federal government, should decide how to run their own elections. That was Mitch McConnell. If you were just, that was totally his voice. But let's hear it from his mouth. So that was a statement, and here he is with a number of other Republican senators voicing his opposition to even this version of the For the People Act.
There's now a debate among Democrats over a revised version produced by one of the Democrats yesterday, which has been endorsed by Stacey Abrams. So I would make this observation about the revised version. It still turns the Federal Election Commission from a judge into a prosecutor by taking away the 3-3 balance and making it 3-2 Democratic. And in what is of extraordinarily dubious constitutionality, would remove redistricting from state legislatures and hand it over to computers. Equally unacceptable, totally inappropriate. All Republicans, I think, will oppose that as well if that were to be surfaced on the floor.
So there you have it, this attempt at bipartisanship from Joe Manchin, who's I guess one of the few Democrats that still believes in it, now completely shot down by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. David, what's your response to Mitch McConnell's, I guess, his assertions in this statement, and also just what this means for Joe Manchin.
Excellent impression, by the way. I didn't really need to see this statement from Mitch McConnell to know his position on any kind of changes to voting rights. In 1998, Democrats and Republicans passed the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, the McCain-Feingold, and the Supreme Court ruling that overturned that was called McConnell versus FEC. This has been where he's been at for close to 20 years, and nothing was going to change about that. So I mean, we have a kind of a unwritten rule at the Prospect that we don't write about things that aren't going to pass, and so you'll see very little on our site about the For the People Act because it's not going to pass, and it very much lets Joe Manchin off the hook to allow him to play this narrative of putting forward a bill that he thinks would be supported by left, right, and center, when he knows that Mitch McConnell is in no way going to be interested in any kind of compromise on this. And this is no different than Joe Manchin deigning to decide to support the PRO Act, which is this pro-union measure, when there's absolutely not 60 votes for that. So as long as Joe Manchin is against the filibuster, it does not matter where he is at on voting rights. It does not matter. So the cart before the horse is what's going on here. So that's my thoughts on it.
And just a quick little reminder. The states that draw their very gerrymandered legislatures or voting districts, they use computers. So Mitch McConnell's wrong about the idea that computers can't draw these heavily partisan gerrymandered districts. They do already. And also he had a problem with the FEC reform, which by the way, right now the FEC's tied 3-3, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. We don't get anything done. Nothing happens. The For the People Act is proposing that change to 5 people so that there's at least a tie-breaking vote in there. I'm gonna see if we have Cenk Uygur on the line. Oh, there he is.
Hey, will you look at that?
There he is.
So first of all, let me just clarify. When I said drop it, I didn't mean like this. So the power went out in the TYT studio, and we've figured out who it is. Of course, it's the Russians.
Every time.
David's thinking, don't start this. Don't start this.
I knew it.
Okay, no, seriously. I wanted to weigh in on what you guys were saying. So I actually slightly disagree with David. We're gonna wind up probably in the same place, but David, I don't think that they're involving Stacey Abrams and having a conversation about For the People Act and the exact compromise they're going to iron out. If they don't have some sort of pre-agreement with Manchin that he is going to get rid of the filibuster, because if otherwise, I mean, you would have to be, whether you're Stacey Abrams or Democratic leadership overall, it would be a fool's errand to have a conversation about compromising parts of the bill without getting an agreement ahead of time that, well, obviously we're gonna have to get rid of the filibuster to do this. I mean, that would be absurd. I mean, that would be so incompetent and ridiculous that I think it's even beyond Democratic leadership, and that's saying a lot. But we might wind up in the same place because I think Sinema's headed towards flipping to Republican. I would be, at this point, I've got that above 50%, and I would be surprised if she didn't flip to Republican. So just when they think they've got it all figured out, Sinema's gonna roll a grenade in there.
David, any thoughts?
That's news to me. The Arizona Republican Party right now is led by people who have commandeered ballots and are looking for bamboo in them. If you think that they're going to vote for Kyrsten Sinema, when every statewide officer has subsequently gone further and further to crazy town. I just don't see that ever happening. So and clearly Kirsten Sinema knows that.
Does she?
She's our crazy, Cenk. Why do you want to give her away?
It's a completely different level of crazy.
No, it's certainly possible that she goes independent, technically, like Murkowski did, rather than Republican. But she missed the January 6th commission vote. That is a very bizarre vote to miss if you're a Democrat. And those votes are usually not missed because you had to go to the dentist. And then today, Politico has a story out about how she's trying to be the next John McCain. And it's all talking about how she doesn't care about the Arizona Democratic Party and what they think. Meanwhile, she's trying to emulate a Republican. So I think Sinema is going to be a bigger problem than Manchin. So those are the key leaves.
That could well be without flipping parties. But I think the larger context of what you're saying is that it's going to be really, really hard, even if this is the exemption, to eliminate the filibuster for legislation. And it's not just a Joe Manchin problem. And it's not just a Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema problem. It's a Dianne Feinstein problem. It's a John Tester problem. It could be a Jack Reed problem. It's a problem of the old lions who know the Senate for what it's been for the last 30 years, and it's a problem of moderates who frankly don't want to be on the line for having accountability on passing legislation. So, and letting the door open a crack for the purpose of voting rights, they would see as allowing the genie to come out of the bottle. So I unless you get an agreement on the filibuster first, I don't think that, and maybe voting rights is the place. That's going to be the red line. Personally, I don't think that's going to be the red line. I think the red line will be when Republicans try to bankrupt the full faith and credit of the country by not voting for the debt limit, which comes up in the fall. That's going to be, I think, the red line if anything gets done. But as far as this is concerned, I just don't see it.
Okay, that derails a lot of what I wanted to discuss. No, I think that's very, very sage advice, and it is true. And it's a little bit, I think a lot of us were scratching our heads as to why Stacey Abrams would agree with sort of a watered down version of the For the People Act. I do want to say that, and let's just go to this graphic. Manchin still supports the disclosure of dark money, tightening the ban on coordinating between candidates and super PACs, requiring tech platforms to disclose political advertising, and a mandate for campaigns to disclose any contacts with foreign actors. He supports a provision to ban partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts and ethics provisions to strengthen foreign lobbying enforcement and tighten conflict of interest rules, including requiring that presidents and vice presidents divest from any financial investments that could pose a conflict of interest after taking office. So when I first saw this, I thought, it's got nothing, but it actually, Manchin doesn't support all of the dark money and the lobbying restrictions that I think progressives we want to see. But it makes sense that someone like Stacey Abrams, who is not a particularly far left person, being for voting rights doesn't make you a leftist, just makes you for democracy. Right. And Stacey Abrams said this, I just want to go to her quote, because she said, look, the GOP efforts to weaponize her support for the new talks among Democrats did not change the political fundamentals of the partisan clash. If I disagreed with it, they were going to oppose it. If I agree with it, they were going to oppose it. There's nothing in the access to the right to vote that will appease Mitch McConnell. That's echoing what David said right there.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to jump in on a couple of those things. So first of all, I like that now being in favor of democracy is a leftist position. I mean, I both like it and don't like it, because the right wing is now saying, yeah, democracy, we could do either way. We can go either way on it, and that's not how. It's not healthy for the country, right? But in terms of
what you said about the bill, Francesca, that's actually exactly what I said yesterday. We have a poll up on it. You go to tyt.com/polls. Which way should it go? And it's polling. I think last I checked it was like 55-45. People saying no, they should vote down the compromise. I'm in the camp of I would take this compromise, even though campaign finance reform is my top issue, and they're getting rid of matching funds. And I'm going to talk to Professor Lessig from Harvard about it, and you guys will see that interview tomorrow. And he's furious about this, and you should be furious that they're taking out the anti-corruption parts. But the Disclose Act is in there, and for me, that tilted the balance towards saying yes. But I don't want to just say yes and let them take out campaign finance reform. So that's why we're now doing a petition where we're asking people, hey, look, or progressives in Congress, I get it. They took out the anti-corruption, campaign finance parts, et cetera. And you want to vote yes on this because it has so many other good parts, which it really does, right? This is not one of these weak compromises like the infrastructure bill, which is nothing but a Republican bill and a total joke, right? This actually has a lot of great stuff in there. Getting rid of gerrymandering is so important. Disclose Act is so important. Okay, but if you're gonna do that and you're gonna take out the great parts of it, then why don't we vote on what you took out? So after you pass this bill, let's then introduce the parts that were taken out as standalone bills in both the House and the Senate. And so if you do that, then we'll get to see who's corrupt and who's not. Now the Democrats are gonna wanna move on, right? They're gonna say, oh, we already voted on that, let's get out of here, right? No, you guys killed. It wasn't the Republicans. It was the Democrats who killed the anti-corruption parts, right? So let's see who's gonna vote yes and who's gonna vote no. Because I think you guys are liars. I don't think you ever meant campaign finance reform. I don't think you were ever gonna do matching funds because that would let people primary you, and you don't want that. You wanna hold on to your power. So progressives, you're in exchange for your vote, you should demand an up and down vote on some, and it's really easy actually, because if they're not lying, the Democratic leadership is not lying, they'll be happy to give you a vote because theoretically they're in favor of it. Pelosi, Schumer, and Biden all say they're in favor of it. So let's vote on this first, then let's vote on the other parts. I know it's gonna lose, I just wanna see who the corrupt Democrats are.
Right, and who's running cover for who. I guess I want to ask both of you, is Manchin gonna tire of looking like an utter fool in front of the entire nation? Like that he's holding this up for some vision of bipartisanship that he knows doesn't exist, and Mitch McConnell just keep on hanging him out to dry? Meanwhile, this week, that recording of him leaked where he was like, okay, well, so if I get him to vote for the, for the January 6th commission, then we can keep the filibuster intact, right, guys? Right, guys? You're gonna keep giving me money, and not even that. He can't win.
That was an amazing call, largely for this reason, because what he was asking these wealthy donors to do was to encourage Republicans through promises of future jobs. Actually, in the case of Roy Blunt, who was retiring, said, you're going to be in a position to give him a job. So if you could tell him that he should vote for the January 6th commission, that would really help me in terms of my position on the filibuster. So it's like Democrats can't even get bribes right. Like they're asking to bribe a Republican. It's a Democrat is someone who can't even take their own side in a bribe. Like they're asking the Republican to be bribed so that it would make it easier for them to do nothing as a Democrat. That was sort of a window into the mind of Joe Manchin, which is not a place that you really want to be.
But David, I'm going to follow up on that, right? So you're a journalist, and so we do talk shows, and as it turns out, now talk show hosts are better journalists than most of the folks in mainstream media. But you're a hardcore real journalist, right? Do you get discouraged about the state of journalism when the rest of the media keeps talking about Joe Manchin's principles and ideas and policy positions? When we all heard it, we just heard it, him on tape, talking about who really decides things. They're telling the donors who to influence, give me money, give the Republican money so we can do this thing. That's the real negotiation. And yet the entire of the mainstream media still pretends as if that's not what's actually happening.
Yeah, it is frustrating. I try to focus on things that have an impact, things that we can make happen. I focus a lot on executive action and not this back and forth in Congress, because it's just so frustrating. But yes, I mean, certainly that tape exposed Manchin as someone. I mean, the only question you have is like, what are you doing in Congress? Like, what is your purpose here? What are you trying to accomplish other than the accomplishment of accomplishing nothing, which is he's really good at. That does seem to be his core competency. But like, what are you up to? What do you want out of?
That I could answer, David. That one's easy. You do nothing if you want to protect the status quo. And the people who are really wealthy and powerful in this country, and especially the corporations that are really wealthy and powerful, like things as they are, because they're currently on top. So if you're on the very top of a system, you would want nothing to fundamentally change. And hence, and so what is Manchin and honestly Joe Biden, what do they get out of it? They get power, they get prestige, they get status, they get glory, right? And they also get money. But mainly it's the power and the glory. And in return, they give the donors what they want. Nothing will change. We will maintain the status quo, and you will remain at the top, and everyone else will remain under you. That's American politics described in about a minute.
Incidentally, we did focus on that one piece of that tape. The other part of the tape was Manchin saying, well, the filibuster would be better if it was 41 people trying to hold the floor rather than 60 people having to do all the work. I could see a talking filibuster. Now he's gone back and forth on this in public statements and now in private statements. But there was like this narrow window where he was talking about this in a way that would force the minority who wants to block legislation to actually do so in the light of day. And so that was a bit of a change for Manchin, and if anything, that's what should be followed up on rather than his wondrous ideas about how things can happen on voting rights.
So just real quick, last thing on this is, if you want to sign the petition, by the way, it's tyt.com/petitions/for-the-people, okay? But you can always go to tyt.com/petitions, and if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook, we'll have the link down below for you guys. But don't let progressives or Democrats just vote yes on this without also making a demand, a reasonable demand, for an up and down vote on the rest of the bill. And logically, there is no way to argue against that. Of course, it being Washington, they're not likely to be logical, but let's do our best in creating the public pressure to make that happen.
Absolutely. I'm gonna move on to a next story. Speaking of things not really changing, and I am skipping a block here, oh blessed producers. So even though the Trump family is gone, the nepotism in the executive branch is somehow not. That's because the Biden administration is continuing a lot of that nepotism, not within the Biden family itself, but in the families very, very close to it. So this is from the Washington Post. In the first few months of Biden's presidency, at least 5 children of his top aides have secured coveted jobs in the new administration. They include 2 sons and a daughter of the White House counselor, the daughter of a deputy White House chief of staff, and the daughter of a director of presidential personnel. The pattern, which continued this week with the Treasury Department's announcement that it was hiring JJ Ricketty, son of Biden counselor Steve Ricketty. By the way, JJ is the 3rd Ricketty child to be part of the administration. He is a 2020 college graduate that was last year, whose father is one of Biden's most trusted West Wing aides. Richey is assuming a junior level position as a special assistant in the Office of Legislative Affairs. Let's go about the other children. Steve Richey's daughter, Shannon Richey, graduated college in 2016 as a deputy associate director of the Office of White House Social Secretary, a job she secured after working at the Aspen Institute on the Biden transition team. Then you've got, I forgot where the other Richey is. He's coming back somewhere. But Bruce Reed, a deputy White House chief of staff and longtime Biden confidant, has a daughter, Julia Reed, who graduated college in 2015 and works as Biden's day scheduler. Guys, just your initial reactions on this. Is this surprising?
Surprising. Here's my initial reaction to it. Of course. So, look, it was Hunter Biden an expert on Ukrainian gas? No, he was not. Okay. So, by the way, was Jared Kushner an expert on Middle East peace? No, he was.
I was gonna say yes. No.
Oh, you were gonna guess yes? Yeah, it's
still holding out hope.
So, this is the oldest game in Washington. Orrin Hatch's son was a giant lobbyist. Orrin Hatch would always vote with his son's firm, but he said, "Oh no, we never met about that. No, over Thanksgiving, we never talk about it. It's just a pure coincidence. I always voted with whatever the lobbying firm wanted." And Norm Coleman's wife had a no-show job, and so they treat politics like, honestly, but to be fair, how a lot of professions worked in this country and still do, unfortunately, which is, hey, you're a mechanic and and you're with a union or whatever, and you want to get your son a job there, right? And it's understandable because you're rooting for your son. And so I'm not saying it in a bad way, but that's, by the way, why we did affirmative action, because people wanted their sons and daughters to get the jobs, but then Black people could never break in because they didn't have the job in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. And so in politics, though, it's a little bit more nefarious because you're not just getting a job as a plumber, you're getting a job as folks who decide where billions or trillions of dollars of money goes, and then we're talking about corruption.
Right. Let me say two things on this. I mean, first of all, these jobs that we're talking about that the 2020 graduate got and some of these, they're low level jobs. I mean, let's be truthful here. It's sort of a soft, petty corruption, and what it says to me is that if you're willing to do this, how far are you willing to take it? Right. So if you're willing to give 3 kids of one guy who's your best bud a job in the White House, what else are you willing to do for that guy? Because let's talk about Steve Richey. Steve Richey and the Richey family is to the Bidens what the Podesta family was to the Clintons.
Got it.
Steve Richey is a healthcare lobbyist. He founded his own firm, Richey and Company, with his brother, who's still in charge of that lobby shop, and counts Amazon as a client, in addition to many pharmaceutical companies. Steve Richey was someone who was the chief of staff of Biden, but he has gone in and out of this lobbying firm and government for 30 years. He was in the Clinton administration. He helped pass the Telecommunications Act of 1996, went back into private practice as a lobbyist. He started advocating on behalf of healthcare firms and so on and so on. So in getting his 3 kids a job at the White House, when that tenure ends, they can go out and say, yes, I know all these people because I worked with them in the White House. And that's how you establish a resume item, and you can go into the lobbying world and say, yes, I have contacts and I know people who worked in the White House because I worked there alongside them. And so this is almost like seeding the next generation of Richeys to continue their work in the revolving door between Washington and big government and big business. So that's what's really going on here.
Yeah. Sorry, Francesca, go ahead.
I was just gonna bring in, it is low level, but it's not all low level, it's not all kids. So the press secretary, Jen Psaki's sister, Stephanie, was appointed senior health advisor at HHS. Ron Klain, I think Ron, right? Advisor to the president.
Yep.
His wife, Monica Medina, was nominated for Assistant Secretary of State focused on oceans and environment. Now, they have experience, so it isn't Kushner trying to do peace in the Middle East. But it also isn't just interns and sort of assistant deputy low-level schedulers. Just to bring that in.
No, that's absolutely right.
Right, so let me say two things about that. First, this is why it's absurd when anybody's partisan, right? Like, what, only Republicans do this? No, of course not. Look, these are all Democrats doing it. It's only Democrats who do it. Were you not awake in the last 4 years, right? And by the way, the last 40 years. So both parties definitely engage in this, and it would be absurd to claim only one of them does, okay? So then number two, there are different levels to it, right? So progressives argued for Ron Klain, who you just talked about, to be chief of staff, and we won on that rather than Richey, because those were 2 out of the 3 options, top options, right? Because Ron Klain is actually better than Richey. Now that doesn't mean that everybody's spick and span and clean. No, but there are different layers to it, right? And I like how Klain sent his wife into the ocean, but you
out
get
to sea.
Yeah, out to sea department, right? Okay, no, but seriously, the Richettys are the reason we don't have Medicare for all. That David's absolutely right. That is the much bigger corruption item here, right? Not that this is not important about the family members, it is. And it's an old time racket in Washington. But the Richettys doing a revolving door of lobbying and political advising, telling politicians for decades on end, remember, protect the pharmaceutical industry. Now they don't say it that way. It's important that we have innovation in the health industry, blah, blah, blah. It's always innovation. Right. But the reality is, no, it's pure corruption. They get paid millions upon millions of dollars from the big drug companies to make sure that no healthcare reform passes. Now, we knew Biden was against Medicare for all from the beginning. But by the way, partly because of Richetti and other lobbyists like that he's been allies with for decades. But even now in his administration, he said that he was going to lower the Medicare eligibility age. And that was one of the very first things that he threw out the window. He said he was going to lower prescription drug prices. Maybe the single most popular policy proposal in the whole country. Everyone, I mean, truly bipartisan, right? Everyone is in favor of that. No, he won't do it. He won't do the most popular thing in the country. Why? Because big drug company lobbyists like the Richettys are his top advisors and tell him not to. And then, by the way, let's close the loop on that, and then funnel millions of dollars into the campaigns of Joe Biden and other top Democrats. That's just a fact.
It seems like Cenk is mad, but I do want to bring in, there is someone who is more mad than Cenk and is not a progressive. I have to just name him, Walter Schaub, formerly of the Office of Government Ethics, which yes, did exist. He resigned under Donald Trump, right? Obviously for many different conflicts of interest that administration had. He is livid and has the most amazing tweet thread that you have to read. But let me just read a few things that he said. He said in response to this story, "I'm sorry, I know some folks don't like hearing any criticism of him, but this royally sucks. I'm disgusted. A lot of us worked hard to tee him up to restore ethics to government and believe the promises. This is a real FU to us and government ethics." He continues and says, "We've got a Raytheon board member leading DOD. We've got a private equity fund people in the White House and at state. You've got corporate execs at big law firms who represent corporations throughout, and personnel is policy. Is he better than Trump? Yes, but that's all that says is that he's better than a straight up crook. That cannot be the standard for ethics. Is he doing some things right? Yes, absolutely. He's doing great with the pandemic and he's starting to rebuild alliances, thank goodness. But authoritarianism and corruption go hand in hand. If we don't clean up government, we're setting the table for the next authoritarian. Speaking of which, Biden's administration is fighting tooth and nail to stop congressional oversight, not just of this administration, but of the Trump administration too.
Walter Shaw, my new favorite person. Go get him. And if you notice, he said a lot of people won't like this because in Washington, you're not allowed to criticize Democratic leadership. People hate that. All right, David.
Yeah, this was a fire thread. It was unbelievable. And Walter Shaw is not like a fire-breathing kind of guy. I mean, this is not somebody you would expect this takes from, especially against someone who's not Trump, right? Yes. Against the Democrats. So good for him and for calling this out, and maybe this will step up the Biden administration to realize the credibility that they're losing by doing, even whether it's the small stuff like a scheduler, or whether it's the stuff like Lloyd Austin, who was on the Raytheon board running the Defense Department, and everything in between. Maybe this level of criticism will let them know that they're straying a little far from their stated principles, not their actual principles.
Yeah, everything's kabuki theater. There's